Alright, the question is, we can export out of Siebel into Excel. Can we import from Excel into Siebel? Right, and then we see that right where the facility for export is present in the menu options, there is a facility for import also. So the question is, it is disabled. Why it is disabled? What does it really do? And how it is used? First of all, kind of a declaration. This feature is not very commonly used. Let's understand first of all, the gist of this question. See, import means importing data into database. Okay, to import data into database, it's an everyday thing. Every day, a lot of data needs to get into Siebel and a lot of data needs to get out of Siebel. Call those nightly batches, daily batches, hourly batches. There are so many batches which run, which import into Siebel or export out of Siebel into other systems. We understand that. I'll take you into system architecture details, then you understand that that is an everyday thing. But this facility that we are talking about and the facility that you are talking about, that export facility, basically lets you export the data out of GUI directly. That is the main thing about it. The great thing about it is it lets you take it out of GUI. Users, the one that I'm talking about, import and export out of Siebel database into and all that, that is a development function, and developers do that all the time. Every day there are so many jobs which basically run. Okay, but the facility that is here is, it's different from that development function. The users themselves, the sales rep, the VPs or the managers, they themselves can export the data out of Siebel into Excel. Okay, that is what this export means. That's what it means to me. I'm not talking about from the database to something outside. So ETL tool is not what we are using here. We are using simply the export facility of Siebel, which means users who do not need to be ETL expert, Siebel has given a facility for them in the GUI itself to export the data out of Siebel into Excel. To restate your question, I will say that is there any functionality? Is there any way of importing the data from Excel into Siebel right from the GUI? That is your question. Because export bhi apne GUI, because you exported from GUI, your question is importing in from GUI, using GUI. User should be able to import it. I'm going to answer that question. Importing and exporting out of database is an everyday thing that happens all the time. Okay, so this is the 3-layer architecture. All these clients, they are interacting with the server, which is in turn interacting with the database, right? Now the gist of your question is, from database, developers do that ETL function, extraction, transformation, loading all the time out of this database directly. They extract the data, they transform it, and they load it. So there is a complete technology. Siebel has a huge way of doing all that stuff. We are not going to get into that. There's a technology called as Enterprise Integration Manager, EIM, which is used to do this work, but that's for database side. Your question is, you are able to export it out from the GUI itself, from the client itself, from the GUI itself, from the client itself. So your question is, can we import from the
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk. Now it is allowed. As you can see, there is a facility, but it requires the intervention of the server. Exporting does not require server. Importing does require. It requires rather EIM manager, same EIM manager, and it is a very, very unstable thing. What happens is, when a user in the client sitting in the client, and he goes and gets and he clicks this import, he will be able to say which Excel does he want to import from. Then a request to the server will be given, and that request will basically take the data, then put it in the database, and then then make sure that it will start showing in the client also. That's how it will work. So it's much more complicated thing than what export does. Export is simply picking it from the client, showing it outside. Import means that data is going to get into Siebel, so it has to get sucked into Siebel properly. It has to go to proper places. It cannot just get into the client. It has to go to all the way to the database. Right?
So it has to first get into
Database. So this import function is a very complicated thing. Yes, they can do it from the GUI. For that, we have to first enable certain things on the server. Only then it will work. Second thing is, even after that, we are talking about a much more unstable functionality. Okay, it becomes very unstable because the request will be generated from the user side into to the server. We'll talk about that, how EIM works, but it basically becomes very unstable. Siebel doesn't work properly, because let's say 800 users are using, and they are basically all trying to import data into Siebel. So that means 800 requests will go into server at the same time for importing lot of data into Siebel database. So that is very unstable. That's going to make the server very unstable. These kind of import requests, they usually hang a lot. The data does not work properly. So this is the most infamous functionality of Siebel. Not many people use it. I've seen it only one client using it out of one client, means like one of my customers or one of my companies using it.
But it can happen.
It is used. Just think about it. What will be the use of that? Why would you like to create accounts into that? Like this. It's a one-time load, and developers will be going here and doing it in the database directly.
Yeah.
So EIM will be used for that scenario. Okay, that's the gist. Importing the data from Excel into Siebel is possible through the database. We are looking for a case when it should be done in the client. Users should be doing it on an ad hoc basis. That means, right? User is working, then all of a sudden realizes, yep, these 5 records I have to get into this. So the way he does it every day is he punches it in. We are talking about a way of importing into Siebel from the Excel directly, right? So the scenario that you have given, it happens all the time. Not only merges, when the new implementation starting, they have a lot of data in Excel. Developers use EIM tool to populate that data into database directly. So that is the way it will be worked out. Rather than using this functionality, rather than using the import functionality here, we'll be using this EIM tool to get the data into database. So we are going to try to come out with a business scenario where users will need to import bulk data into Siebel on an ad hoc basis, and probably it is not feasible. It doesn't make any sense for them to contact the developers to enter that data, because otherwise, even if they want to import like 10,000 records today, they will give it to developers, they will import it into Siebel, and that's how it should be done. And that facility is always there, EIM. Problem is, why to get it into through the client side? Okay, from the client itself. Why users should get the data from using the import functionality in the client side? That is the whole idea. So let's come out with a scenario for that, business scenario for that. So some of the ideas that I got is like, maybe user will, let's say they will get the order, they'll put the order in Excel, and then they will, at the end of the day, they will import it into Siebel. Well, then that is the whole purpose of Siebel, that they should be able to enter the data properly into Siebel right away. Why should they, enter it into Excel first? So that probably idea does not make any sense here. Similarly, then you said that maybe there is a way, orders are coming in bulk from some other company, right? But then we'll simply, they will send it to developers to be entered into Siebel, What happens is, so that scenario is also like, it's good, but it's still unlikely, very unlikely. The scenario that I'm going to give is the business scenario that one of my clients used is very interesting. See, what happens is there is a thing called as prospect lists. See, like these guys, like this Comcast and all those guys, they buy list of people from places, from third-party companies, and then they call them. Credit cards do that. So it's in the marketing world, in the marketing department, they frequently buy lists and they call them. It's like so much. It's like so frequent that like once in a week, every user will be getting access to like maybe a list of maybe 200 people, and that's their bread and butter.
You get those in installments or at once?
Bulk, installment, both.
Oh, I see.
And they get it. So they have the tie-ups with the third-party list vendors, who sell lists. They buy those lists and have to call them. So they import it into Siebel, and then it starts showing it in Siebel. Then they start calling. So, but the reason why they get it into Siebel is because while making a call, they have to log what happened during that call. When they call this number, this person, this number, then what happened? So they have to import it into Siebel, and they have to log that result against that person, right? So the reports get generated in Siebel and all these things for the VPs and everything. How many people were imported into Siebel and how many people they called. So they track all this. So on a daily basis, let's say about 200 lists will be imported. If used to be imported by that company had about a list of like 800 people who were actively using Siebel, and out of them they were importing every day. So every week every person was having like 1 or 2 lists per week. So that means on an average every day about 200 lists were getting imported. That was physically impossible to have it was physically impossible to have a development team to get those lists and import it for them in a real time basis. They need it on real time, right? I get the list and I want to start calling right away. Why should I wait for 2 days? So development would have meant they would have to wait for like 2 days. Development means they have to clean the list, they have to design the EM load, then they have to suck it into C, then they have to test the load in QA, then you have to get it into production, right? That's how you will do a bad job, right? So it was from turnaround time standpoint, it was just physically impossible to have that functionality. This functionality is actually existing only for those lists. Siebel kept that functionality in mind, that in marketing world, users need to import the lists of prospects. They just get a list of last name, first name, number. You must be getting calls, right? I get a call from Gutter Guardian every day.
Yeah.
They sell gutters. And the window sealers, something, windows, they sell so many things, sidings and all that. So so they how do they work is they import the list and then they keep calling those guys. Okay, so for that thing, I get a list, I want to start calling them right away. I don't want to wait for developers to do the import. So the only way it is possible is there should be a way to import it through the client. Oh god, the way it works is that Siebel client issues a request to the server to create a small EAM job to import that list. So a job gets created, it sucks it, it puts it into the database, and it starts showing in the client also. So basically, in effect, it's an EAM job.
Exactly.
It's an EAM job. The only thing is the request is generated at the client side, not at the database side, not by the developer, right? The only difference is this. So this whole functionality, because of this linkage, does not work. See, the request should be generated by the developer from here, right? And developer is a very he's a kind of a good programmer. He has a programming background. He knows whether the list will import properly or not, whether there is a problem in the list or not. He can see the errors. The users who are sitting here, they will not be very good if there is some problem in the list. Then let's say there is a comma in the list which cannot be imported. They will not remove it. They wouldn't know how to clean the data before importing, how to make it ready for importing. So this is one reason. If 200 lists are getting imported by 200 users at a given time, I can tell you there's gonna be at least 20% error, right? So 40 lists will not get imported properly. That means there's a lot of backlog in the server, and it is erroring out. It is doing things which it cannot do properly. Server will be always, clogged, and server will always be throwing errors even to the transactions. So server used to hang a lot. It used not to hang, but it used to you used to see a lot of jobs, pending jobs in server, and there used to be a lot of problem in the server, right? Just because you cannot see. Exporting data into database is a big function. It better be done by some expert people. In this case, there was a business need. It's a real business need. So there was no way just to provide this functionality. So they enabled this functionality, but the only thing is we're wreaking havoc on the functionality. Quite frankly, out of 800 people, 200 people stopped using Siebel within like a month. So user adoption rate was so low. They said that we have to import these lists in a real-time basis, and ourselves. We don't want to wait for developers to come back after 3 hours or 3 days. So we have to do it immediately. Then they said it is not working in Siebel, so we don't want to use Siebel at all. That's what the whole issue was. So 200 people dropped Siebel immediately. And when I left that company, there were big issues regarding adopting Siebel. So other people, whole departments were saying that we don't want to. There was one department which had 150 users sitting in Ireland. They said that we don't want to use Siebel at all. So that's called as user adoption issues, and we are facing huge user adoption issues because of this crucial functionality, and that was not present in Siebel in a perfect manner.
The bread and butter depends upon sales, so we should have thought about it earlier.
This is not sales. This is marketing.
Marketing.
Cold calling.
Yeah.
You know what is cold calling, right? This is cold calling. You make cold calls to people. You just get their number somehow, and you start making calls. Would you like to have a gutter guardian? I don't know what's that. What gutter cleaning service? People say, I don't have a house, I don't have a gutter. I mean, I don't have a gutter here, right? Why would I need? But this just get a hold of people with their names and numbers, start calling them. They call some Mr. Bradley here. I'm not Bradley, but I told her several times. She still calls me. I get 5 calls every week. Okay? That's called as cold calling. So for cold calling, you need the lists, and you want to import the list immediately. That's a main business need. Siebel does provide it. but it is a very very poor tool. You know, the way I think the situation should be handled is, the business should come out with a way of getting this list once in a week, and a big list, you know, and then they should give it to the developers. The developers should clean it, then they can do it in within a day. You know, if they get it once in a week, then the two developers can be nominated for every Monday morning. They'll get it by Tuesday morning, they'll put it in Siebel. This is the way this thing should be done. I don't know how other companies are doing, whether they're using Siebel for marketing purposes or not, but if they are using, and this is the best way, they should be doing like this. This is the best way. Otherwise, Siebel is unusable if you allow individual users to import lists out of client. It's very unstable.
Which are the list